What if everything came with a free Star Wars audiobook from Audible, like at the cantina?
I'll take a half-cap spotchka, light whip.
Here's your free audiobook download for Master and Apprentice from Audible.
Or getting your pod racer serviced.
My pod racer needs upgrades to the coupling and stabilizer.
And here's your free audiobook download for Resistance Reborn from Audible.
Life in the galaxy doesn't work that way, but there is one place you can go where you can get a free Star Wars audiobook from Audible. And that's Youtini.com/audible. Click the Audible logo and start your 30-day free trial, which includes a free audiobook download. So visit Youtini.com/audible and get your free Star Wars audiobook download today.
Hello, Mark Thompson, this is. The voice of Yoda I am in many Star Wars audiobooks. Do or do not listen to Youtini.
Welcome to the Living Force Podcast.
I am Oksana Florin, Deputy Assistant Administrator to the Vice Admiral of the Federation of Trade Route Allocation and Monetization.
A Youtini production.
Here with an offer from His Eminence, the Senior Vice Admiral.
Episode 72, interview with Sarah Kuhn.
Your spice, for our hard-working slaves, I brought you a sample.
On this episode, the Youtini crew talks with Sarah Kuhn, author of the Dr. Aphra audio drama.
To bring forth the merchandise.
And now, here are your hosts, Dr. Corey Helton, Eric Eilerson, and Dr. Charles Henkel.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of The Living Force. Today, we have a full house in studio, and by that, I mean in all of our very different states. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Eilerson. Joining me are the doctors. We have Dr. Corey Helton. Hello.
Hello, hello.
And we have Dr. Charles Henkel. Hey, buddy.
Hello there. What's going on?
Not much, man. Actually, a lot, because we are also rounded out by the renowned author of the Heroine Complex books, I Love You So, Moshi, Shadow of the Batgirl, and, of course, the recently lauded audio drama, Dr. Aphra. Sarah Kuhn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Oh, we are so happy to have you on this show. We've all, in our whole community, been loving Aphra for the last couple of weeks. We can't wait to pick your brain about the second ever Star Wars audio drama. Like, it's still so crazy that this happened.
I know. Pretty cool, huh?
Absolutely. So let's start out right there. Based on you, how did the Star Wars films and books first ever come into your life?
That's such an interesting question because, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't remember a time they weren't in my life.
Sure.
I grew up with the first movies, the first trilogy, and I think probably everyone here can relate to being a nerd child, and. As a nerd child, I was certainly very obsessed with anything that I even decided I liked a little bit. So I did read a lot of the novels, the tie-ins, the expanded universe. I grew up with all of that stuff. And so it's really cool to have written something in the canon.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have a favorite EU novel when you were growing up, one that just got the binding was all messed up because you read it so many times?
I've actually I wrote an essay a few years ago about my obsession with the courtship of Princess Leia.
Oh my gosh, Stacy on our team will love that. She's obsessed with that book.
I was so obsessed with that book. And I was actually, because I think, back when it came out, I don't think the internet was really such a thing. So I didn't know that a lot of people actually didn't like it. But I feel
those people are wrong. It's okay.
I feel like there's definitely a subset of obsessives, and I feel like many of them are women. And I think perhaps the reason, which is part of what I wrote this essay about, is that book is extremely horny. In a really great way.
Yeah.
And it really lets Princess Leia express some desires and tell Han Solo that she likes the way his pants fit. And
don't we all?
I think that was pretty that was like a pretty big moment for my preteen self. So yeah, if I had to pick one, that one certainly sticks out in my mind.
Oh my gosh, perfect. And we've talked about that book a decent amount over the years, because there's like the romance novel cover, and then there's like the fake action movie cover, and it's like, okay, whoever you are, they're trying to sell you this book, whether you're into like the horniness of it or the little rancor on the cover. I think it works for everyone.
I think I definitely had the romance novel cover. That would have been the one I was very drawn to.
Yeah, honest, same. It's right over there. Love it.
That's fantastic. Did you have like, what was your sort of first love, I guess, with it all? Was it like the books exclusively? Did you kind of get into the comics as well? Like,
you mean besides like beyond the movies? Or
sure, yeah.
Well, yeah, because like my first love was obviously the movies. Just I was so obsessed with them, and it was probably, I would guess it was something like the novelization of Empire Strikes Back, because that movie also has some very sexy moments, and I was definitely a shipper from a very young age. I love romance, I still do, and I was so into certain scenes of I was into the whole movie, but I was very into certain scenes from that movie. And so I think because with the novelization, you could like read that part over and over again if you wanted to. And it also tended to go a little bit more in depth about, what people are feeling, what the internal monologue is, like the attraction, like all of that. So I'm guessing that was probably the first one I read that I got really obsessed with, at least certain parts of it.
Awesome.
That's awesome. So shifting gears a little bit, kind of talking about Aphra, how did this kind of project kind of come about? It's always fun to hear from authors, like, what were you doing when you got the email? Did you freak out initially? Like, how did this kind of come about?
I love those stories as well. I think I was at Target. And I got this was obviously in pre-pandemic times. I was at Target, and
I miss going to Target.
Yeah, it really used to be a thing you could do casually. And I got a phone call from my agent, and usually my agent, if she has something, she'll email me. Like that's usually the fastest way to get a hold of me. I'm sometimes not great at actually like answering my phone or even seeing that it's ringing. And so I saw she was calling, and I was like, oh, she's calling. It must be something really important, so I should probably answer. So I did, and she was basically like, hey, I knew that I had to call you with this. We got an offer for you for Star Wars. And really, before she could say anything else, I was just so excited. And then when she said it's for Dr. Aphra, that was like, it was really just the best possible thing that could have happened. I loved that character so much, and it felt like such a good match. And so, yeah, it was a really exciting phone call to get.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Did they brief you? Did you know it was going to be an audio drama, like right out of the gate?
Yes, I think so. To be honest with you, I do not remember a lot of what she said, what my agent said, like after those two things. But then, of course, she forwarded me like the email from Elizabeth Schaefer, who's the editor at Del Rey, who's really awesome, that I got to work with. And it kind of broke down. Okay, like it's an audio drama, like what we did with Dooku. It's Dr. Aphra. We want to kind of adapt her first arc, her origin, to sort of introduce her perhaps to more people. And I think that was they might have included like, oh, here's kind of target length or target word count. So I definitely got like kind of the specs to consider. Yeah.
Nice.
And it sounds like you were already pretty familiar with the character of Aphra. Is that right? Did you follow along with the comics as they came out, or?
Yeah, I love Aphra. I think my husband actually, who's also, was also raised on Star Wars. He was like really into her like right away, and I think he was like, oh, here is something I think is like. But yeah, she's just like, I think from her first appearance, she really just grabs you by the throat. The way that Karen Gillan and Salvador Larroca like set her up is like so amazing. She's so vibrant, like right from the jump. So yeah, I was a huge fan of hers. I liked kind of the spirit she brought to it. I thought she was a little bit different than a lot of the characters we'd seen. She's obviously very chaotic. Like there's kind of, you don't really know what she's going to do next. So yeah, I was a huge fan of hers, and I was really flattered that Elizabeth thought of me for this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And this project in particular was really interesting because it was sort of this first-person point of view, and a lot of things come along with that with a character like Aphra. But I'm interested to know if you had your pick of any character in the entire Star Wars galaxy to give this similar type of story treatment, who might that be? If you could choose anyone, prequels, original trilogy, sequels, who would you go with?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. And I'm not entirely sure. I think it would depend on the context. But I have always been obsessed with Jess Pava, like ever since she debuted in Force Awakens. And, she didn't have like a ton of screen time, but obviously like as a mixed race Asian American woman, I noticed her immediately. And then I remember my friend, one of my friends that I went to that movie with the first time, who's also a mixed race Asian American woman, like we saw her and we sort of turned to each other like, oh my God. And then we were like, oh, what? No, she's going to die. Like, that's just what happened.
Oh no, right.
This situation is very dangerous.
Man.
So we were like really excited when she didn't. And I think, I think like, she also, I know she's been like explored a little bit elsewhere, but I don't know that she's really been given that sort of full like entire backstory treatment. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like Star Wars has so many great characters that I feel like we could hear from in this manner, in this sort of POV manner, that I think, anyone would be really excited to do that with. And it was just extra fun that Aphra was such a good match for this sort of kind of story.
Right. And it's fun you mentioned Jess, because then, it gets my mind thinking of all the great audiobooks we've had with pilots, like the Alphabet Squadron books, all the sound effects of the ships. I'm just imagining now the narration of Jess as she's piloting throughout. Like, the editors would have a field day with that. I can only... Okay, already got a wish list. Great. Now... when we've been talking about Aphra recently, a lot of comments, both within the Youtini community and online as a whole, have talked about how like genuine your tone was for Aphra. Like, the writing was very organic and it was very genuine. Is there a particular method that you use as a writer when you're trying to get into a character's head, like before you start writing, in order to like hear her voice better, or does it kind of flow as you write?
Well, I think that with a character like this, there is a lot of material about her already. You kind of read all that you can, reread all that you can, and try to absorb it and kind of try to get her voice going in your head. And I feel like usually at the beginning, there's a little bit of a stop and go, and you kind of have to like get to the end before you really, really got it. And then of course you can go back and revise. And she had obviously a really strong voice from the beginning. I mean, Kieran wrote such great lines for her. I think the one that we've talked about a lot, which I felt like sort of unlocked the story for us, was she says something like, the way I've lived, I know I'm lucky to be alive. And I felt like that sort of captured a lot about her. So that was sort of like what I started with. And of course, like all of the stuff that had been done already. And I think that for me, her voice was a very natural fit. Elizabeth told me on our Comic-Con panel that I was like her first and only choice for this, which was like really exciting and flattering because, I usually imagine with any IP, but especially Star Wars, because like everybody wants Star Wars. Like I just imagine for everything they have like a huge list. And they're sort of going down the list, and so that was really nice to hear. But I think she saw that there was something a little bit in the same spirit in the Heroine Complex books. Like those books are very voicey, like the protagonist is, doesn't really have a filter. Like it's kind of like, it's not exactly the same. And, the protagonists of that series have very different personalities than Aphra. But I think there was something about the style that made sense. So I felt like I did have, I think, a pretty good handle on her voice from the beginning, just because of all of those different things coming together. But I definitely felt it more once I got to the end and could kind of go back and like really be in her head with her.
Absolutely. I mean, like you're saying, Aphra is such a wonderfully chaotic force, and without a doubt, you captured that beautifully.
Thank you.
Yeah, and another part of her personality and her life that is so important, I think, is that she is notably an LGBTQ woman of color in Star Wars, which is fantastic. And I want to ask specifically, you really accentuated her relationship with Sana in this book. It's some of the, personally, my favorite stuff in the book. It's been talked about a ton on how just really great it is. How important was it for you to amplify Aphra's voice in that particular way in the Star Wars universe?
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm always a sucker for a good romance.
Right.
And, and I love Star Wars romance because it's like there's just so much happening. It's so fraught. It's so tortured. And, so like soft and cuddly sometimes also. So that was something that I just like, I was like, wow, if I can kind of add something to her story, I feel like it's this. I feel like it's kind of exploring this really interesting relationship that we've mostly seen afterwards when they hate each other. So I wanted to know kind of what they were like before. So that was definitely something I wanted to bring out. And yeah, I mean, from a purely representational standpoint, I love that she resonates for so many people for different reasons. And that she is kind of someone who we haven't maybe seen a lot of in the Star Wars universe. And I also really love that she really kind of just loves who she is. Like she always is very much herself. She doesn't apologize for it. There's nothing really like, the things that she doesn't like about herself are more due to like her inability to sort of tell people that she cares about them or have actual like human relationships or like whatever it is. And again, those are so deep, I feel like not something she usually admits, but I just love that she's so like into who she is and she's like having such a good time. And I think a lot of times when women of color or queer characters or queer women of color characters show up in things, it's sort of not fun. Like it's a lot of times it's like, oh, they're there to be tortured or they're there to teach someone a lesson about racism or they have to be really serious all the time because they have to be like a good role model. And with Aphra, I just felt like they're like, no, she's just herself, and she's like really happy about it.
She's Aphra. This is
she's
how it
just
is.
Aphra. Yeah, she's just chaos. And so, that was important to me to kind of like, I guess, tell a story where all of that was very apparent, and also kind of, I don't know what the right word is, like speak to a lot of her fans who she means so much to. She means a lot to me for those reasons as well. And I really love that we're hopefully reaching a point where that's not even a big, that could maybe at some point not even be a big deal anymore. It's just sort of because there's so many queer women of color characters. Like that would be amazing. But I wanted to hopefully, I know she has a lot of really passionate, dedicated fans, and I certainly consider myself one of them. So I did think about like, what would I like to see as a fan? And those things are really important. And I'm glad that is speaking to people, and that the people who do love her sort of feel that was represented in this story.
Absolutely.
That has certainly been the feedback that we've gotten in our community specifically, is like we preach all the time that we want people to feel like they belong in Star Wars, right? And like the more opportunities we get for people to do that, I think the happier everybody can be about it. So,
yeah, it's a big galaxy.
Yes, absolutely. Plus, give me more of the making out in the stacks in the library, please. Like, come on, that's such a beautiful trope to be in Star Wars. I'm so happy it's there.
Yeah. I mean, what Elizabeth and I kind of noticed when we were working on it is that like her courtship, like her way of courting someone is so like her, like. She's always falling off things or like dropping things or like she's always like making like a ruckus. Like I just love that. I love like what a disaster that is. And so that was super fun to write.
It's funny, going back to the courtship of Princess Leia being such a formative thing. This is like the courtship of Sana Staros. I mean, she's looking at Sana the exact same way that Leia is looking at Han's pants. I mean, some of those scenes, it's so great.
Emily Wu Zeller, like who plays Aphra, like she like brought it. Like she had to do so much in this book. She had to play so many different things, and it's like it's a 300-page like internal monologue. Like obviously there's many other important voices, but I think that no one would deny that she kind of had to work the hardest. And that scene especially where she first sees Sana, my husband was laughing because we were listening to it, and he was like, I think Emily's voice like dropped an octave. Like she's like, like there's like definitely like a change in tone that's very like she's noticing her, and I really love that she really like went for that she was like, no, she's like, she's really noticing this person, and she's like kind of immediately smitten, and she doesn't want to be, so that's like a fun conflict too.
Yeah, speaking of tropes we love, it's like oh, she's really hot, I shouldn't, but I want to, but I don't want to, but I shouldn't. Oh, it's drama inherently.
It's fantastic. Also, capturing that in audio was absolutely fantastic. I mean, like you put it, like there's so many overtones like in an audio drama just in voice. Like voice actors are really on such another level, and she totally nailed it. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, all of these guys, like everyone who was in the cast was so amazing, and except for Emily, since she was playing like the biggest role, I think all of them played like at least a couple parts. Like they're so multi-talented, and what really blew me away is that the producer of this is Nick Martorelli. He's amazing. He put together such like an amazing soundscape and kind of everything that went into the production. But because of the pandemic, they actually all had to record in their homes. They didn't get together like they did for Dooku, and then it's kind of like you get to play off of each other, and you're in a studio, and you get, you're being directed and all this stuff. So Nick actually directed all of the actors like individually. Like I think he read like all the other parts when they were recording.
Oh my gosh.
So the joke we made on the Comic-Con panel was that somebody's going to start a campaign to release the Martorelli cut, because it's just like him talking, like him doing all the voices. I think
who needs the High Republic? Let's get that.
I know. Like I think the only thing that was recorded, like the two people were together, was they did get Emily and Nicole Lewis, who plays Sana, together on Zoom, so they could record some of the Aphra Sana scenes together and get that chemistry, which I think they did a really beautiful job with. But it really blows me away to listen to that and to realize that most of those people were recording in their houses without sort of the benefit of these other actors to play off of.
Yeah, I think I was fortunate enough to watch a lot of that Comic-Con panel, and didn't Mark Thompson say like his wife was giving a therapy session during a recording?
Yeah, and he's like, he has to pretend like he's being tortured or something, so he was like screaming, and she was like, this is like not conducive to giving therapy. But yeah, I think that's so amazing that, he's like in his kid's bedroom, like making this like full performance.
Yeah. Wow.
That's fantastic.
That
my wife is also a therapist. Yeah. My wife is also a therapist, and I can certainly relate to that. I get a lot of the listen, you need to like calm down. This is not a good time. Oh, fantastic.
Man, well, kind of getting back to some of the writing process, we've had the honor of talking to quite a few of the most recent Star Wars authors, at least in canon. And this audio drama thing is pretty new. So what was it like, and how much kind of research did you have to do into writing a project like this, an audio drama, as compared to what you might be more used to?
That is super interesting. And that was like a really, like, it felt a little bit like, oh, this is kind of a, new ground, like new frontier that we're covering. So I looked at, they sent me everything for Dooku. So I kind of looked at, what Cavan had done, what Cavan Scott, who wrote Dooku, had done, and like how it kind of went from step to step. And Nick Martorelli was very generous in helping me sort of like figure out how things work in audio. He sent me kind of a list of like tips or like things not to do, or like, here's some things to try. And it felt a little bit like a combination of a lot of the different mediums I write in. So it was a little bit like prose, because you don't have a visual component. So you still have to describe things for people, because they don't know what the room looks like, or what this person looks like, or what's happening. And but then it's also kind of like comics or screenwriting, because you also don't want to disrupt the flow of the dialogue with too much description. You want those scenes to flow so people feel really immersed, and not like it's just kind of a regular audiobook with someone still doing a lot of acting but reading the prose verbatim. So that was super interesting, and it was really interesting, like the sort of things that came up that we were like, oh right, like you can see this on the page, but you can't, like, you don't really know if you're just listening what's happening. So there were little things like there's that scene where they're trying to kind of ambush Luke, and they, like, Aphra comes up with this brilliant plan to spray paint 000 gold so that he can impersonate C-3PO. And so we were like, okay, like, she's saying she's gonna paint, like, she's kind of like, oh, I have this great plan, but she doesn't say, I'm going to spray paint you gold. So we had to kind of be like, okay, what do we have to put here so that it's still like funny? Like, it's not just like, she's like, here's what I'm doing, but that it's also clear what the plan is before they go into the plan. And I think what we did was, like, Nick was like, what if there was kind of a little thing where he's trying to, like, change his voice so that it matches, like, how C-3PO talks, because obviously 000 sounds different. And that led to a bunch of other questions where I was like, okay, well, like, what does he sound like? Like, does his voice sound like C-3PO but evil? Like, is it just like what he's saying is different but the tone is the same? Or does he have, like, kind of a different tone to his voice, so he would actually be going through these motions of, like, changing the way he sounds? So those were, like, really interesting conversations to have, because you sort of realize what makes the story work in one medium needs to be changed a little bit to make it work in another one.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's funny, because as someone who read these Vader comics and Aphra comics later on myself, I didn't realize until I heard this audio drama that I was absolutely just putting 3PO's voice in my head for him.
Yeah,
because
I mean, I feel like
droid,
that's probably what I was doing too. I think that was something that we were like, oh right, that's like something we have to consider. And so I think Nick really worked with Sean Keenan, who gives voice to 000, to come up with what that voice is. Like, I think what he said was, he was like, well, I feel like C-3PO has this very, like, he's kind of passive aggressive, and 000 is just kind of aggressive. So perhaps, his accent or his tone or, like, the way he expresses himself is more along those lines. And I think what they came up with is amazing. I think it does sound sort of like what that droid would sound like.
Oh yeah, and with people like Sean especially, so many of them came from the Dooku Jedi Lost cast. A lot of them came in. It was funny being like, this is 000 murdering, but also Sifo-Dyas. So it was fun making those little, like, comparisons. That was a good time.
Oh, that's fantastic. So speaking of like kind of sounds and writing for that, what was it like trying to write for Black Chrysanthemum?
Well, first of all, I had to make like a macro of his name, because I never spelled it right the first time. I also wasn't entirely clear on how it was pronounced until I actually heard it in the audiobook. But it was funny because, you know, in the comics, like a lot of those, the sounds, the Wookiee sounds are like, they're written out as sound effects. And I wanted to kind of preserve that. But we also had to be, it was like, okay, if you look at the art on the page, you can tell what the emotion is like behind this roar. But if you just hear it, or if it's like put on the page in the way that's a little bit generic, maybe you don't know, like it's not as clear. And since like you have, just like you have in all of Star Wars, like then the humanoid character is kind of responding as if they understand, and it gives the viewer, the listener, the viewer, the context of like, oh, that's what that person said. So we ended up just, I would put these kind of like parentheticals that are like the mood. And so it was like, it's like this. So it would be like, this is a triumphant Wookiee roar. This is a sad Wookiee roar. I think on the panel, Mark Thompson we talked about the petty Wookiee roar, and he kind of demonstrated what that was. And it was
what a gem of a man.
I know, he came up with like all these different roars, and I think he played Chewbacca too, so he had to do like different Wookiee voices and make them sound different and make them sound like, you know, the Wookiees that we know, and convey the emotion in the Wookiee roar. But it's funny because I think sometimes people think those are just like, you know, pre-recorded sound effects or something. They're like, oh, they have the Wookiee roar and they just put it in. And I was like, no, there's a performance. Like if you listen, there's like a real. I think you can tell there's a real performance.
Yes.
But yeah, those are the days like when I was writing dialogue that was like Wookiees or droids beeping at each other, that you just sort of feel like, wow, my job is ridiculous. Like I wrote 2 pages of droids beeping at each other, and that is my job.
It was done so well though. Like I don't know if you ever played the old like Knights of the Old Republic games, or like have seen the gameplay or anything like that. But like when you go to the planets of alien species, like you go to Kashyyyk and talk to the Wookiees, it's just literally just like for literally, and all this dialogue is on the screen. It was just Chris like skip. I can't handle listening to this anymore. So like at least it was like short phrases and stuff. I much prefer the emotional Wookiee roar rather than just literally lines and lines of dialogue. So
you know, they're like I you know, giving the actors their due respect. They need the performance they can give.
Yes.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Although, my gosh, getting Chewbacca and Black Chrysanthemum talking, it's got to be like Stitch talking to Gollum or something. Like your voice just has to be murdered by the end of it.
Yeah, maybe that was why his wife was disturbed, because he could hear all of that through the wall.
Maybe.
Oh, man. Well, it sounds like you had a lot of kind of unique challenges with writing this project that maybe you haven't had on previous things. I'm assuming Wookiees weren't a part of the Heroine Chronicles or anything.
No, not really. I mean, there are like sound effects kind of in the Heroine Complex books, because they are very like comic book inspired.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely there aren't like pages of dialogue between like Wookiees. Like that was definitely unique.
Yet, I mean, hey.
Yeah. Wait for the crossover. But what was it like? How was the writing process different in writing like a first-person point of view story as opposed to the more traditional third person?
Well, it's interesting because I usually write in first person. The sort of genres and subgenres I write in tend to lend themselves very well to that. That's something I'm really comfortable with. So I was actually really excited that they were up for that they were sort of up for like telling this whole story in Aphra's voice, from Aphra's POV. I think that was something that was really important to all of us. So it actually felt pretty natural. I think that, you know, it depends on the book and the genre and everything else, but I think also for me, it did make it feel a little bit more personal. You know, when I'm writing in first person, I tend to feel just a little bit closer to that character. I feel a little bit more, you know, like I'm constantly in their head, because I kind of am. So it was really just a joy to be able to to write that way in Star Wars, in canon. And it felt appropriate because I didn't, I think we thought that Aphra probably wouldn't want anyone else telling her story.
Oh, wow. Great point. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. Well, on that note of Aphra's being Aphra's story, right? Like, it was a pre-existing story, but we always asked a lot of writers like what it's like to write within Star Wars, because obviously each project is pretty hush hush. Some people get like whether you're pitching, whether you're receiving assignments, things like that. How did you find this experience kind of unique in that way? Did you find that you were thinking about, okay, I want to write this scene, but I got to make sure I fit in these parameters, or did you feel like you had a decent amount of leeway to kind of write your own thing?
I think it was kind of like morphing as I went from step to step, because certainly when I got this job, I mean, I was excited, but I was also super intimidated. I mean, there's there's not a lot of franchises that are like Star Wars. There just aren't. So I was intimidated. I felt like, I really want to do this, and I just hope that, I can do it. I can do it well. And I did kind of have this idea of because I've written a decent amount of IP at this point, and it's always a little bit different depending on who holds the license and, the company doing it and all that. But, so I didn't, I hadn't worked with Elizabeth before. I hadn't worked with Del Rey before. I hadn't worked on Star Wars before. And so I was kind of like, I wonder, I feel like, I want to be faithful, but of course, since this is an expansion, I do want to bring kind of my own point of view to it and the sort of the things I want to write about. And I didn't know. I was like, I don't know what they'll let me do. I don't know what I can, what boundaries I can kind of push or where the boundaries even are. That's something you sort of learn as you're doing it when you're writing, any kind of licensed anything. And so usually, how
tight can the pants be? I mean, you got to find out.
How tight can the pants be? And sometimes there are weird things that you don't know about that end up being rules. I wrote these Barbie comics, and that was super interesting because they do send you this kind of Barbie guidebook style guide sort of thing. Wow, and so it would be Barbie does this, Barbie does this. Barbie's very supportive of her friends, and I remember one of the don't do's was Barbie is not snarky. She is always very kind, and she doesn't use slang. She doesn't use sort of modern, and I think that's because they don't want to date it. It doesn't want to seem it's stuck in a certain time period. Because when the book comes out, maybe no one's using that slang anymore, and it seems automatically dated.
Interesting.
And that was an interesting challenge for me because I tend to write, very colloquially, lots of snark, lots of slang, and so that presented an interesting challenge, but it also wasn't something I would have thought of before getting that job, that Barbie doesn't use slang. And so with this, you're sort of wondering okay, what are the rules that I don't know about? What's going to come up? So usually my approach with stuff like this is I will look at whatever they've given me. I will assume those are the parameters. And when I write my sort of first little pitch / outline, whatever document it is they want me to write, I try to throw everything in and see what takes. And I just, I'm assuming if I do something that is not allowed or that is not possible because maybe there's another project that I don't know about that this has to connect, whatever it is. I'm just assuming they're going to tell me and, know that I didn't know about that because it was a huge secret that they couldn't tell me. So with this, I was okay, I did a little pitch document / outline that was just sort of here's my take on the story. And I think because they had, this was a tryout, they had essentially told me, you had this job. I wasn't competing with a bunch of other people. I was well, I'm just going to put in what I want to do, which is, a lot of it was the Sana storyline. It was the framing device where she's making this recording and we don't know exactly why initially. And then the stuff with her her backstory, the opening scene with Maz. Like I kind of highlighted a lot of the new stuff because obviously the stuff that was in the comics had already been approved and published, and I assumed they were fine with that. And then I was kind of like, oh, I don't know what the parameters here are. I wonder if they'll let me do this. Like, will they let me tell this story with Sana? Will this be something people are interested in? Like, will it be like, oh no, we actually wanted you to focus on this, like whatever it is. But I mean, they were actually very open. I did not get a lot of feedback as far as, the story, or, I mean, a lot of the story was already there, but like the things I added, like, it was kind of just like, no, keep going, like add more. Like, I think they really liked this sort of like way that we stitched it together. So it was an arc instead of, since the comic book was Vader, not Aphra until later, there are parts where like she disappears for a while. And so like, if you just kind of piece together all of her appearances, it could, I think, maybe seem a little piecemeal in this format. So I think they liked that I had given it this sort of context and this overarching story and this framing device. And yeah, for the most part, there wasn't really anything that that came up that was like, you can't do this. I think the two things I remember were when they do the deep like lore dive, which I was like, great, because I know a lot about Star Wars, but I know there's stuff I don't know. Like there's stuff everybody like has something they don't know about Star Wars because there is just so much of it. So I think the two things were like, a lot of the planets I had included that were just like mentioned were like planets we already knew, because I was like, oh, like I can't add that to canon. Like they're not going to let me make up a planet. Like I just have to add all these ones that have already been used. And actually they were like, oh, this, we don't want to just mention sort of the things that are in the films that people already know. So can you switch this up a little bit? And like here, maybe when you mention Hoth, could this be like, this could be something else? Like you can take a lesser known planet, you can make up a planet. And I was like, well, of course, if you're telling me that I can make up a planet, I'm going to do that.
That's fantastic.
So I made up a planet and a system actually called Sargen, which is my name and one of my best friends' names, Jen, put together.
Nice. And that's like forever now.
That's forever. It's like I'm like, look, we're in the canon. Like
there's gotta be a Wikipedia article now.
Is like a real planet now.
It's like buying a star for someone, but it's better.
Yeah, I was like, pretty cool. Maybe they'll put a little thing on Wikipedia or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe like in the future, some other people will go to this system. And then the other thing was, I think there was a part where I just needed, like, there is like this quippy line, and I wanted to mention like an animal or a creature that was really cute. And so at first I think I just put porgs, because I was like, they have like big eyes, like, and they were like, oh no, like probably at this point, like not a lot of people know about porgs, like probably Aphra doesn't know about porgs, like that's not necessarily something that would be like a common reference at this point in time. And so I was like, okay, what else is cute? Ewoks? And they were like, also still just a little bit early for Ewoks. Like, so then I think finally they were like, what about this like lesser known cute creature that does have an entry on Wikipedia? Like, it's not like at this point people would know about this. And I was like, okay, great. But that's just fun. That's like, like, I can't believe this is on like the official comments on a Word document. Like, it's that like, we're talking about like, when have people heard about porgs enough to reference them? I think is pretty funny.
Absolutely. And hey, I mean, speaking of funny now, you got my brain going with like, we have these Deadpool comics where he'll go into Marvel and Shakespeare. I need Aphra to go into the Barbie universe now, because she would just create complete madness.
Yeah, she would make a mess. I mean, I think Elizabeth said to me at one point, like, the way that I had written Aphra's narration, because she also keeps like kind of messing with the recording and like commenting on what's happening in the scene and stuff like that, and she was like, wow, this just makes me really want like an Aphra show that's like Fleabag, where she's kind of like always like talking to the audience.
Oh my
and,
God.
You know, she like
That's
her commentary is like so like snarky. And I was like, wow, yeah, I can actually really picture that.
Oh my gosh, yeah, just replace Santa with Hot Priest and you're good. You're good to go.
Oh man, well, kind of on a similar note with you.
To Hot Priest?
No, not to Hot Priest.
Okay.
More like Aphra's Chaos.
Okay.
You know, we talked about how a lot of, obviously, her backstory was already in the comics. And I think it's interesting how, you know, some things that play in the panels are maybe more difficult to play in more of a live setting, like whether that's an audio drama or if it's a live action TV show. And we've seen some of that with like a lot of the superhero movies that have come out, etc. Did you ever feel like you had to like rein back on any part of Aphra, or are you like, I'm going full Aphra right now?
Well, I mean, I think like why take on a character like Aphra if you're not going to go full Aphra?
Yes.
I think we really tried to push the Aphra-ness of it all as much as we could. And of course that might translate differently in different mediums. You know, the way that she is so extra might be a little bit different in the comics than it is when you are hearing her voice. But yeah, I think like we really tried to go like to make it as Aphra as possible.
Yeah, full Aphra.
Success.
We all
full
approve.
chaos.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, Sarah, kind of as we sort of wrap up, something we ask all of our authors is kind of about the concept of legacy, right? So Star Wars is really all about legacy. I mean, it's all about we have the Skywalker legacy, right? We have the legacy of Anakin. We have this sort of storytelling tradition all through the entire saga, books, comics, movies, everything, all about really legacy. And what we really like to ask authors that come on the show and chat with us is like, what do you know, you sort of, you're going to have your own Wikipedia article, right? We could plan it and yourself as an author. And like, what do you want your personal legacy to be on this genre, on this universe? Like, what is your personal stamp?
I mean, I would really just love to make people feel seen, like to really make people feel like kind of what we were talking about earlier. The galaxy is big. We all have a place in it. We should all feel like we belong. We should also all feel like we can be the center of that story. You know, I think that a lot of times when issues of representation come up, and as a woman of color, I kind of feel like we're always sort of the last to get anything. A lot of times when this comes up, it's like, well, aren't you happy there's like this one, you know, side character that appears in 2 minutes of film or like whatever it is.
Yeah.
You're like, I mean, that's great to be able to see that. At the same time, there is, you know, a lot of times, not specifically in Star Wars, but just in like any franchise that you're looking at, a lot of times the people who are centered look the same as the people who have always been centered. And so it's kind of like, okay, but I think everyone deserves to feel like they can be the star, they can be the protagonist, this can be their story, they can tell their own story. And I know certainly for me, like sort of like growing up with a lot of this stuff, like, you know, being an avid consumer of TV and movies and comics and books and everything, like it does have an effect on your life. It does kind of make you feel like, oh, you know, being sort of the center of anything, being even the protagonist of your own life is like for other people. Like, that's not for me. That's not something I ever expect to see. So just being able to see someone like Aphra being the star of something and having like everything about her really centered and having that mean something to people. And, you know, I'm very moved by the people who have messaged me and told me like, you know, thank you for writing this relationship, or thank you for writing Aphra this way, or thank you for focusing so much on her and Sana. That's what I always wanted. You know, that really means everything. And so I would just like to be able to tell stories, you know, and I am of course hoping that I'll get to tell other stories in this galaxy, but just to be able to tell stories where people feel seen and they feel like they matter and they feel like, oh, okay, I can not only exist in Star Wars, but I can be this, I can be the center of Star Wars. I can be the main hero, or, Aphra, I guess, is sort of like on the line between hero and villain and everything in between, but that I can be that person who's really the star of the show.
Yeah, well, I mean, as admittedly 3 men who have never had the problem of finding ourselves in the center of any story ever, we are so thrilled that you and other writers are bringing characters like Aphra and Sana in the center where they goddamn deserve to be. And I will second, third, and fourth that we hope that you are going to be writing many, many more as the years go on. And congrats, Aphra is a triumph in every way, and it's honestly during this year that's been tough. It's exactly what a lot of folks needed, as is evident. So
thank you.
Yeah, it's seriously excellent. Before we let you get out of here, can you tell everyone else that's listening where they can find you online, and if you have anything that you can talk about coming up, feel free.
Yeah, well, people can find me a lot on Twitter. Usually there when I'm supposed to be doing something else. And
beautiful.
It's just my name, Sarah Kuhn, Kuhn. I'm on Instagram as Sarah Kuhn Books because I think someone else took Sarah Kuhn before I could get to it. And then I have a website that probably needs to be updated. It's just heroinecomplex.com. It's heroin like super heroin, not like the drug. And I had a few things come out this year. I wrote a graphic novel for DC with the artist Nicole Gu called Shadow of the Batgirl that came out earlier this year, which actually seems like 5 million years ago. But it did in fact come out this year. And it's about Cassandra Cain, who is the Asian American Batgirl. And the 4th book in my Heroine Complex series, which is called Haunted Heroine, came out earlier in July. And there are at least 2 more books coming in that series. And then in later August, I wrote a graphic novel with the artist J-Bone, which is called The Riverdale Diaries Hello Betty. It's basically middle grade Betty and Veronica. It's like them and all their friends, and they start middle school. And J-Bone's designs for all the kids are super, super adorable. So if you like things that are cute, or you have kids who like things that are cute, then you might like that one.
Oh my gosh, well, amazing. We will be on the lookout for all of those, and again, all your future work in here. Sarah, once again, thank you so much for coming and chatting with us. It was an absolute blast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
There is no hatred. There is joy. There is no division. There is union. There is no apathy. There is passion. There is no gatekeeping. There is community. This is the Youtini Star Wars fan code. Embrace it. Live by it, and above all, trust in the living force. That's all for this week. Join our community and surround yourself with like-minded fans by visiting us online at youtini.com. Until next time, may the force be with you.